Hi everyone, welcome back to my studio. In this part we're going to be working on the feathers and the final details. If you've missed part 1 or part 2, they're going to be listed in the description below. When I'm working quite a large piece like this, I like to take the feathers section by section. So I've sectioned off this side of the feathers and I'm starting off by blocking in the darkest areas, initially with the grey and then coming in with the black over the top of that. I'm then going to be using a combination of cream and light grey to block in the lightest areas. I am using a mid-tone grey for transition purposes as and when I need it. So as you can see, I'm working through the lights and the darks, paying close attention to my reference photo. I've added some brown in here just to warm up some of those shadows so they're not too dull. I want them to be quite warm in tone, so that's why I'm adding the brown through those sections as well. I'm now coming in lightly with the blending stuff, and I'm paying close attention to also blend along areas, so where I've done the previous section, so there's not too much transition. I'm now coming in with the final details for this area. Moving on to the next section, I'm working along where I see that there's a dark line, and I'm using black, grey and brown to work in that darkest area. Once I'm happy that I've got that darkest area blocked in, I'm going to start working through with cream and a light grey to start blocking in the clumps of feathers as I see them. I'm paying attention to go roughly in the right areas with length and direction. I'm using a brown and a mid-tone grey to build up the shadows within the clumps as I make them. I'm also going to be paying really close attention to the area underneath the face feathers that we did, where, to make sure that the transition between the two is really soft. You can see I'm coming in and correcting roughly with I didn't have the line quite in the right place, so I'm using greys and dark browns to build up that area of shadow under the face feathers and using brown to build up the shadow underneath the beak. I just keep working through using this same process. I identify a clump of feathers and I draw them in. You'll also notice that the feathers on this part of the body are much longer than the feathers that we drew on the face. It's also important to pay really close attention to your reference photo so you notice any changes in direction or length within the feathers. Once I've got all this area blocked in, I move through really lightly with the blending stump, and you can see I'm blending in the direction, taking it clump by clump to make sure that I've got those all softly blended out. I can now move on to the details of these feathers. So you'll notice that I start to use some white that I didn't use in the previous layer, and I'm using that cross-hatching motion that we used on the face to create the illusion of feathers crossing over one another. I continue to use browns and greys to warm up the shadows and create the contrast between the different areas. You'll notice that I overlap each clump of feathers to the next clump of feathers, and this will create a more natural look within the piece. You'll notice that quite often once I've come in and drawn a clump of feathers with the white pencil, I'll then come in with a brown or grey to draw in between the lines of the feathers that I've drawn. This will create the illusion of shadow right next to the feathers that I've drawn and create a more realistic look. For the areas where the feathers aren't so light, you'll notice that I quite often come in with a beige pencil. I use the exact same process of cross-hatching and overlapping the different areas, but not every area needs you to come in with white. This will make the piece look flat and less realistic, so it's quite often good to come in with a mid-tone value and create the illusion of feathers that way. Moving down to the feathers on the body, I'm using black, brown and grey to map out the areas of the darkest shadow. These are the areas that I mapped out when I done my original line sketch, so it's given me something to follow. If you find it hard when you have a big area like this, it's quite good. You can work in small areas like 3" by 3". Just concentrate on one area at a time if it's quite overwhelming to do such a big area. But look at it all as abstract shapes. Don't think, oh, I'm drawing a feather, it's got to be this shape. Look at it all as abstract shapes and then you'll find it easier. Once I've worked through all the black, brown and grey and I'm happy that I've got all my darkest areas blocked in, I'm now moving through with beige and cream just to create those lighter values. I'm overlapping and I'm being quite messy at this point. I'm not, although I am going in the direction and I'm concentrating on length, I'm not worrying about my pencil strokes. When I blend through this time, I'm much firmer with the blending stump than I have been with previous layers. I'm making sure that I'm blending each area into the next one. Moving through on these details, I'm using creams and whites to create the feathers just how we have in the other areas, but some of these are quite a lot longer. I use the mid-tone beige for transitions between the areas of dark and light, and I will come in with lots of black and lots of brown just to really hype up the contrast and make sure those dark areas are as dark as they need to be. During this part, I'm constantly checking back to my reference photo just to see if I've made a certain area too light or too dark. And if I have, it doesn't matter, I can adjust it back, it's not a problem at all. But just keeping an eye on where I'm going and whether I've worked an area as light as it needs to be and as dark as I need to be. I'm also really conscious of overlapping areas of feathers into the next one so they look realistic and not one clump of feathers sat next to another clump of feathers. You really have to work those details in, overlapping all the time. And once I get to this stage and I am happy with the overall look of the feathers, I'm literally just coming in, working piece by piece, checking that I've got my lights light enough and my darks dark enough. You know, that is the difference that will make your piece look more realistic. And just adding in all these little final details of cross hatching as and where they need to be. Once I'm happy that all my feathers are in place, I come back to the eye just to give it some final details and really make the piece pop. A lot of beginners are worried to do this because they think that they've done all the hard work and they don't want to ruin their piece. But this is what will really make the difference and really make your piece pop. You'll see here I'm using a black charcoal pencil, and I really do recommend these if you work in pastel, because I always come in when I'm doing my real fine details and it will be much blacker than the original pastel pencil that you put down. Likewise, I use the white charcoal pencil for my whitest whites. I have linked in the description below to all the products that I've used, so if you do want to check them out, they're linked below. So moving back through the eye, it's sort of similar to with the feathers. I'm checking that I've got my darks dark enough and my lights light enough. I'm working through where maybe I might have smudged slightly and just tidying up all those little details. If I see an area of yellow that maybe needs to be lighter or darker, I will work that in. So at this stage, I'm really checking to my reference photo all the time, working out whether an area needs more shadow or whether it needs to be brighter, and all these little extra layers that you add will really make a difference. And I'm still working in that circular motion that I've used all the way through for doing the eye to keep the spherical look. I'm adding some more shadow above the top there and just blending it out gently. And you can really see the difference that it's making to this eye here. I'm just using the blending stump there, and I'm really lightly tapping on some of the shadows that are close to the pupil because I felt that they were a little bit too bright, and just by doing that, the pastel that was already on the blending stump just made that a little bit darker, and that saved me having to glaze a layer of pencil over the top of it. It's just dulled those down. I'm now following exactly the same process on the second eye, so coming in and darkening up with that black charcoal pencil. You can see where maybe during the drawing I slightly smudged that, and that had lost a lot of its really deep black look, and it's really making a difference to add that back in. And glazing some bright yellow over because I could see that there was a difference between the two eyes. I hadn't created the second one as bright as the first one. Adding in the highlight again, just so it's as bright as it needs to be. And again with the blending stump, you can see I'm blending the black from the bit at the top down, and then I'm having to redraw that black in because I smudged some of that out, and adding a shadow down the side that I hadn't noticed before, and again gently blending that out. And this bit at the end, you know, it does take some extra time, but it is really, really worth it to improve the quality of your piece. Again, like I did on the other eye, just tap in where I wanted to dull down some of those highlights that were a little bit too bright, and looking backwards and forwards to my reference photo. You'll also notice that this part of the piece that all my pencils are really sharp, because I want to come in with the really, really fine details. I'm following exactly the same process on the beak that I did with the eyes, where I see that an area that needs a bit more colour or a bit more light or shadow, I'm just working that in. And now I'm working on some of those spiky hairs around, and putting in that black charcoal pencil will really make these look much, much darker, and you can really see that they're really starting to pop within the piece. And you can see I'm coming around feathers there and just adding in a little bit of shadow behind them. Adding in that shadow over the top of the eye really, really helps the eyes to look more realistic. And working in any light or dark areas that I've missed or I just feel need a bit more saturation. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial series, and if you have, please give me a like and a comment below. I'd love to see how you've got on with creating your own owl. If there's an animal that you would like me to draw next and create a tutorial on, please do let me know in the comments as well below, and I will do my best to make sure I do a tutorial on that animal. To keep up to date with all my tutorials, please do give this video a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon. Bye bye.